champion for the biblical values this nation was founded upon.
When you listen to Stacey on the Right, you're going to hear news and information, politics, culture, family. You're going to hear scripture. You're going to hear all of that from the biblical worldview.
American Family Radio presents Stacey on the Right with Stacey Washington, beginning Monday, August 6th at 2 p.m. Central.
Do you believe that people could take the president's vitriol as a call to arms?
I definitely think they could. I'm afraid that he could incite them to violence. A lot of them are on the edge anyway.
Are you saying that you would be willing to shut the government down?
I'll always leave room for negotiation.
People want government cut down. They don't like it to be shut down.
I would be certainly willing to consider a shutdown if we don't get proper border security.
Is the $25 billion a red line for you?
I have no red line.
For the president to trigger something like this with a month to go before the midterm election would be possibly as dumb an idea as I can imagine.
Very much, everybody. Thank you.
Mr. President, if there is no collusion with the parents, if they come in illegally.
Come on, Jim. Go. We're done.
Freedom prospers when religion is vibrant and the rule of law under God is acknowledged.
An informed patriot is what we want.
Welcome to American Family Radio's Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio.
Muscular Christianity.
Where we relentlessly explore the intersection of truth and politics.
The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
Now, here's your host, Brian Fisher.
Howdy, welcome back to Focal Point, American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name. Great to have you in the conversation. Let's see, Jeff, we're going to have Stacey on tomorrow, is it?
Not confirmed yet, but
okay.
Yes.
We're working to get Stacey Washington on this program as a guest so you can meet her before her program starts.
Tomorrow's Wednesday.
Tomorrow's Wednesday?
Yeah, let's work on Thursday.
Okay, so it's probably going to be Thursday if we are able to get her. She's on air at the same time that we are, so that makes it a little bit difficult to get a interview with her. So anyway, we're working on that, and don't forget her program begins in the second hour slot of Focal Point. Focal Point will be trimmed to 1 hour next Monday, starting on August 6th. And in the place of that second hour, Stacey Washington, Stacey on the Right, her program will run starting on Monday, August 6th, and going Monday through Friday. Anyway, let's turn our attention to the Word of God as we customarily do at the beginning of the program. If you're reading along with us and praying along with us, our reading and prayer is in Isaiah 56 and 57 today. And I want to address my comments today to parents who have a prodigal son, a prodigal daughter who has drifted from God, who has rejected the spiritual heritage that you gave him or gave her. I'm going to use him here generically for both sexes. And your prodigal seems to be beyond reach. And so this is a word of encouragement for those who are the parents of prodigals. Now, the first thing, I think the first hint we get here about what we are to do about this in Isaiah 56 is that we are to be sure that we have cleared a path for them to come back to us. In trying to retrieve a prodigal, sometimes a lot of junk gets in the way. And when you look in the direction of your prodigal, you just see a pile of briars and thorns and brush that stands between you and your son or daughter. So the first thing to do is to clear away all of the brush, all of the briars, all of the thistles that you are responsible for. This is what he says in chapter 56 of verse 14 of chapter 56. Let's see. Well, I just lost my verse. Where is that? Anyway, I've got it in my notes, so I'll just read it from my notes. Where he says, prepare the way, remove every obstruction from my people's way. So be sure that you have forgiven the sins of your prodigal against you. Be sure you have forgiven them, have chosen to forgive them for the hurt that they have caused you, for the hurtful things that they have said or done to you. Be sure that you have dealt with any of your sins against them. Allow God to search your heart and bring to your mind anything that you need to set right with them, any rubble that you need to clear out of the way. And by the way, be prepared for the enemy to sow false guilt in your heart, to make false accusations against you. Remember, the New Testament says in Revelation that he is the accuser of the brethren. He will accuse you for things that are not sin at all. Perhaps you were doing the thing that you were supposed to do. It aroused some kind of kickback, and you automatically began to assume that that was your fault. It may not be. You might have done exactly what you were supposed to do, and the responsibility for whatever happened there may rest on the other person. So be prepared to look for false guilt, because it's easy when we are deeply concerned over a prodigal, it's easy to beat ourselves up, to blame ourselves for things that are not in fact our fault. So be sure you seek God for discernment there. Now, the second thing we do is just wait for God to work. We just wait for God to work. Remember the father of the prodigal son. Remember, all he could do was wait and watch. He did not run after his prodigal son. He didn't try to drag him back home. He waited until his son hit bottom. Now, the Bible tells us here that God dwells and lives in two places. He lives in the most holy places. He inhabits eternity. He dwells in a high and holy place. But he also has a heart for those that are contrite and lowly, those who are humble and repentant. He's eager to come down from his high place, from his high and holy place, and come alongside those who are repentant and live with them, come alongside them to give new life to their spirit and new life to their heart. This is what he says in verse 15 of Isaiah 57, "For thus says the one who is high and lifted up, who inhabits eternity, whose name is holy. I dwell in the high and holy place, and also with him who is of a contrite and lowly spirit, to revive the spirit of the lowly and to revive the heart of the contrite." So, what if your prodigal is not contrite and not humble and lowly in spirit? We see that God dwells with those who are, but our prodigals often are not, even after a lot of prayer that we extend on the place. So what do we do? Here's the question. How does God bring our prodigal back to the place of humility before him? How does he do that work? And what Isaiah says is the only way that God can do that is through pain. He must contend with them until they have been humble. That's the part of this process that we don't like. He does say in verse 16, "I will not contend forever." I'm going to have to fight with them. I'm going to have to contend with them for their good, for their redemption, for their salvation. And he says this in verse 17, "Because of the iniquity of his unjust gain, I was angry. I struck him. I hid my face and was angry, but he went on backsliding in the way of his own heart." So God says, even though I may have already inflicted some pain, he's so determined to go his own direction that he keeps on sliding back down the hill. So the point here is that it oftentimes takes a lot of pain for God to get a prodigal's attention. So one of the things I would urge you to do is to give God permission to inflict as much pain as he needs to on your prodigal to bring him back to God and bring him back to you. God says in verse 18, "I have seen his ways," those backsliding ways, "but," he says, "I will heal him. I will lead him and restore comfort to him and his mourners." Who are his mourners? That's us. We mourn over the wandering off the path. We mourn over the distance they have created between themselves and us. But God assures us that he will lead them, he will heal them, he will comfort them, and he will restore them. Well, let's take a moment and pray right now for those that we love from Isaiah chapter 57. Lord God, we come before your throne today. I pray for myself, for my family, for the listening audience of Focal Point, everyone within the sound of my voice. When we are in difficult circumstances, Lord, I pray that your salvation will be close at hand and that your righteousness will soon be revealed on our behalf. May we hold fast to you and keep our hands from doing any evil. Even though you see that our ways and the ways of our prodigals are willful at times, I pray that you will not contend with us forever, but instead heal us, guide us, restore us, and comfort us.
Welcome to the AFA Spotlight. I'm Jim Stanley, General Manager of AFR, and we have a lot of divisions here at AFA. This week, we're shining the spotlight on American Family News.
Hi, this is AFR News Director Fred Jackson. More than 20 years ago, AFA's founder Don Wildman came to the realization that the message of conservative Christian America was being dismissed by the mainstream media. And so that's how American Family News was born. Well, since that time, God has brought together a team of reporters and anchors and editors whose daily mission is to produce newscasts that give our supporters not only the latest breaking news from around the country and the world, but also to give special coverage to news of particular interest to Christians, all of that from a biblical perspective. Over the years, we've taken our radio product and we now use that material to create a news website, onenewsnow.com, and we regard it as a privilege to serve God in this fashion.
But evil men and seducers shall wax worse and worse, deceiving and being deceived. My name is Abraham Hamilton III, and this is the Hamilton Minute. During a TEDx talk at the University of Würzburg in Germany, Professor Mirjam Hain argued that pedophilia is a natural sexual orientation, just like heterosexuality. This coincides with an effort by pedophiles to rebrand themselves as minor-attracted persons and secure their place among the LGBTQ identifications. On the heels of the same-sex marriage achievements and the current transgenderism momentum, pedophile groups are arguing that their sexual orientation should also be recognized and granted rights. Ministries like AFA warned about this for years. We're here now.
Listen each weekday from 5 to 6 p.m. Central for the Hamilton Corner. For more from Abraham Hamilton III, Public Policy Analyst for the American Family Association.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio.
Howdy, welcome back to Focal Point, American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name. You know, speaking of the wall, just for a moment, City of San Diego is going to blacklist any companies, any construction companies that work on that wall. They will become ineligible for any city contracts. That's how mean and nasty this thing has gotten. Now, I want to talk for a minute. I want to expand a little bit more on what I talked about yesterday, this law, or this portion of a law that the Republicans passed that will tax churches. In fact, it will impose a 21% tax on churches. You read that right. The Republicans have done this. The Republicans are guilty of this. The Republicans passed a bill, passed a law that will impose a 21% tax on certain benefits that churches give to their employees. This would be a first in United States history. This is buried in the bowels of that 2017 tax reform bill. This reminds you of what Nancy Pelosi said. You got to pass it to find out what's in it. Here's a taxing provision on churches, no less, that was buried so deep in this bill that it is only now, the bill was passed in December. We're now, what are we, into June? Or July. We're at the end of July. Man, time flies when you're having fun. Into July, and this provision is just now breaking the surface. Now, remember, Obamacare bill was 2,300-page monstrosity. This isn't quite that bad, but still, the bill itself is 500 pages long. The conference report that tells you what it's going to do is 600 pages long. It adds up to 304,000 words. So it's a pretty hefty deal. Now, the troublesome provision here about this tax is it was probably intended originally to level the playing field between for-profit hospitals and nonprofit hospitals on benefits that the hospital provides to employees. You know, a lot of hospitals, major hospitals, are located in fairly densely populated urban areas where parking is at a premium. Very expensive proposition. So a lot of hospitals, for-profit hospitals, were apparently forced in the olden days to pay taxes on the parking and transit benefits they would give to their employees. They might give them a parking pass. Those parking passes downtown at a premium. If they're parking 5 days a week, 8, 9 hours a day, that kind of adds up. So for-profit hospitals say, we'll give you, one of your perks will be you get this parking pass or you get a transit pass. We'll give you a pass to use public transport to get to work. And the federal government says, well, that's a benefit to the employee from the employer, so you got to pay taxes on that. And now apparently they wanted to level the playing field between for-profit and nonprofit hospitals. So they say to nonprofit hospitals, if you give this benefit, you're going to be taxed on it too at 21% because we want to try to make it level all the way across the field. But somebody in there somewhere decided to insert language that would impose this tax on every nonprofit organization in the country, and specifically mentions churches for some reason. Now let's remember that this bill was passed along strict party lines, 51 to 48. All 51 Republicans voted for these tax reductions, except this is a tax increase of 21%. 48 Democrats present voted against it. Now, the odd thing about all this is the only congressmen who seem exercised about this blatant violation of the First Amendment are Democrats. They're the only ones that are worked up about this thing. Now, a lot of them are active in or pastors of black churches. Now, Republicans are the one that's supposed to represent us, but they are blasé and apathetic about repealing this provision at all. The way McClatchy reported it, Republicans' appetite seems to be tepid. Well, tepid is a word for lukewarm. This is the temperature of the water that Jesus promised to spew out of his mouth in Revelation 3:16. So the typical response of the GOP lawmaker is that, well, this is not going to affect very many churches. Well, that's not the point. The fact that it will affect even one church is the point. Remember, to paraphrase Martin Luther King Jr., a threat to religious liberty anywhere is a threat to religious liberty everywhere. Now, one Republican assured McClatchy that it wouldn't be, in McClatchy's words, quote, a widespread problem. Well, think of the admission here. A problem that isn't widespread is still a what? It's still a problem. Words out of his own mouth. And there is every likelihood that the cancer that we're talking about here will expand its creep as government power inevitably does, consuming big chunks of religious liberty at every advance. Think about the Johnson Amendment from 1954. This is an amendment to a bill that wasn't even targeted at churches at all. It was targeted at nonprofits that had campaigned against Lyndon Johnson. They were political nonprofits. They went on the campaign trail against Lyndon Johnson. That ticked him off, so he tacked on this amendment to take a strip out of the hide of political nonprofits who had campaigned against him in his reelection campaign. But since churches are nonprofits, the anti-liberty left pounced on this provision and has been threatening every church in America since 1954 with extinction if they so much as express a political thought. So cowed by the real or imagined threat, churches began to withdraw from the political arena virtually all at once. And America began its slide toward the moral abyss that we are in today. No salt, no light in the public arena because the church pulled out. Remember, Jesus said, we're the salt of the earth, the light of the world. Salt is to arrest the spread of decay and corruption. Light is to dispel darkness. That's our job. The world is a corrupt place, and it is an ignorant place. It's in darkness, and it is corrupt. And the church is the organization that God has raised up to be salt in the world, to arrest the spread of decay at all levels, in business, education, and politics. And we are the light of the world. We are the ones that have the abiding truth of the Word of God. And if we don't release that truth into our culture, if we don't teach it to this culture, then it will go blundering on in the darkness, the blind leading the blind. So that's how we got to the place where we are today. But remember, black churches didn't let this Johnson Amendment slow them down. Remember the civil rights movement, that started where? In black churches, and was led by black pastors. So they continued to be salt, continued to be light in the public arena on the issue of civil rights. So what happened as a result? They brought about the end of legal racial segregation. They brought about the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Voting Rights Act of 1965, both of which had more Republican support than Democrat support. By the way, it was the Democrats that filibustered the Civil Rights Act of 1964. So you can only wonder what the American landscape would be like today if the evangelical church in particular had been as active then as they are today. Now, this is weird because for the first time perhaps in my whole life, I am standing firmly with the Congressional Black Caucus. Assistant Minority Leader Jim Clyburn of South Carolina. His daughter's name is Mignon, like in filet mignon. That's probably a loving thing for a father to do, but his daughter's name means steak. I don't know what she thinks about that. Anyway, that's off topic. Jim Clyburn, South Carolina, he's crafted a bill that will fix this problem. He has 31 co-sponsors so far, none of them Republicans. But Republicans, I suggest, had better get their minds right in a hurry. Here's what Dan Busby, who's the president of the Evangelical Council for Financial Accountability, a great organization, we belong to this, that is designed to hold evangelical groups accountable for their financial stewardship. Here's what he said. This is an issue that will not go away. When you stir up 400,000 houses of worship and then hundreds of thousands of nonprofits on top of that, you have a pretty mighty force that's going to get attention on this issue. And remember, the word about this is just now leaking out. I read my first news story about it, I think 2 days ago. I think it's been on somebody's radar for about a month, but just breaking in to the circles that I frequent just in the last couple of days. Now, churches in America have always been tax exempt out of respect for religious liberty and the honored place that Christianity has always played in American history, out of recognition that they're not businesses but houses of worship, in regard for the many contributions that churches make to the health of their communities, not the least of which is teaching parishioners how to be good citizens. Government can't put a price on what it means to have churches week after week after week encouraging their people to be law-abiding, responsible citizens committed to their communities, to their families, and to their churches. You can't put a price tag on that, and churches do that at no cost to the public treasury. Thomas Jefferson's wall of separation. Remember his wall of separation? People have this exactly backwards. Thomas Jefferson's wall of separation, contrary to popular myth, was not intended to restrict the political influence of the church. It was rather intended to protect the church from the interference of the state. Thomas Jefferson said, look, the state is not allowed to stick its nose into the business of the church because the Constitution has erected a wall of separation to protect the church, to guard it from political interference, but not to insulate the state from the influence of the church. Well, the Republicans, in my view, just punched a pretty good-sized hole in Jefferson's wall, and they better get busy about the task of repairing it. So that's going on. I've got a column up on this topic. If you'd like to read it, I would encourage you to share this with your neighbors, share it with people in your Bible study, share it with your pastor. Share this on Facebook. You can find the link on our Focal Point Facebook page. I've got a tweet out that Jeff just sent out. A tweet has a link to this column. So if you're on Twitter, go to my Twitter account at Brian J. Fisher and tweet it out to everybody on your Twitter feed. We'll be right back with more content. You are listening to Focal Point on the American Family Radio Network. Brian Fisher, congenial, convivial, amiable. As always, be right back.
This is Dr. Richard Land, president of Southern Evangelical Seminary. Welcome to Bringing Every Thought Captive. This past week, a historic meeting took place in Washington, D.C. The Trump administration and the U.S. State Department held an unprecedented meeting of government and civic leaders from around the world to discuss the tremendous threats to religious freedom across the globe. The meeting was entitled The Ministerial to Advance Religious Freedom. It gathered government and civic society leaders from more than 80 countries. The unprecedented meeting highlighted, condemned, and sought remedies for religious persecution of any and all religious beliefs around the world. Secretary of State Pompeo declared, quote, "Religious freedom is something that's very important to me personally. It's very important to President Trump. And the State Department is going to lead the world in opening up religious freedom to every citizen," end quote. This conference is sending the strongest possible message that America is once again going to be the champion of religious freedom around the world. We do not believe that this is merely an American right. It is a universal human right. Every human being has the right to worship as they please, without coercion from government or from anyone else. This event is being held on the 20th anniversary of the signing into law of the International Religious Freedom Act in 1998, which requires the President and the Congress to take religious freedom issues into account in conducting U.S. foreign policy. Tomorrow, more on this terribly important issue. This is Richard Land.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio. Listen to the audio podcast or download today's program at afr.net. You can also read Brian Fisher's columns at afa.net.
Howdy, and welcome back to Focal Point, American Family Radio. Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on Conservative Talk Radio. And you may have heard that Attorney General Jeff Sessions, now again, we've all had a lot of dissatisfaction with Jeff Sessions, but like I said, this guy's a strong man of faith. He's a strong man of principle. He has integrity. He's kind of in the tortoise and the hare deal. He's the tortoise, but he eventually is going to get to a lot of good places, and he has formed a religious liberty task force in the Department of Justice that's going to be about the business of instructing the American people on religious liberty and the proper deference that Christianity and other religious traditions have under American law and the American Constitution. You know, it's interesting to me that in all the examples he gave of how the Attorney General has intervened, they were all about Hindu houses of worship and Muslim houses of worship and Jewish synagogues and all that. Only one example was an example of the Justice Department going to bat for a Christian organization. That's the Little Sisters of the Poor. So again, this political correctness just creeps in everywhere, and apparently he felt obligated to try, as if it was going to do him any good, to show how diverse and multicultural the Department of Justice is. The media is not going to care about that. They won't even notice if he does something nice for Muslims or Hindus. They're just going to wait till he does something nice for Christians, and then the screeching will immediately become ultra high decibel level. But at any rate, you know, Jeff Sessions is going to create this Religious Liberty Task Force. That's a quote, Religious Liberty Task Force, at a time, he says, when courts have been asked how to balance anti-discrimination laws against the First Amendment's religious freedom guarantees. Ladies and gentlemen, there is no balance here. There is no balance. There should be absolutely no attempt to balance First Amendment freedoms against the gay agenda. There's just no comparison between the two. There are no rights granted in the Constitution to those who engage in sexual deviancy. There are none. Not one single solitary right is given to people of aberrant sexually behaviors in the Constitution, but the protection for religious liberty is explicit, it is direct, and it is comprehensive. So if you have a conflict between the homosexual agenda and the religious liberty protections of the First Amendment, somebody is going to have to be discriminated against. And under the Constitution of the United States as given to us by the founders, it better not be Christians. Christians better not be the ones that are discriminated against if there's a conflict between Christianity and the homosexual agenda. If anybody's going to be discriminated against in that conflict, it's going to be those that are engaged in sexually deviant behavior and therefore have absolutely no rights under the United States Constitution as given to us by the founders. So not all forms of discrimination, ladies and gentlemen, are bad. Not all we discriminate against murderers. We put them in prison for life. We discriminate against jaywalkers. We fine them. We discriminate against burglars. We fine them and force them to pay reparations and all that kind of stuff. So not all discrimination is bad. It's just a question, if the Constitution is your guide, who is going to be discriminated against by whom? And under the Founders' Constitution, it better not be Christians. Okay, so good for Jeff Sessions for coming up with that task force, and may God bless him in that effort. Let me hit you with some other news kind of the day. I'll kind of run through these fairly quickly. This is sort of our lightning round for the day, Jeff.
Real quick, on a little pickup on what you were just talking about with the religious task force.
The Religious Liberty Task Force.
It looks as though, judging by Jeff Sessions' remarks yesterday morning, when he was rolling this out, seems to suggest that they will be or could be investigating the SPLC very soon.
Okay, good. Does it say specifically what for?
Well, I can read a quote from it. He said, Jeff Sessions says, a dangerous and movement undetected by many is now challenging and eroding our great tradition of religious freedom. And then he talks about a certain group. One group can. It's a shame that one group can actively target religious groups by labeling them as a hate group based on their sincerely held religious beliefs.
Yeah, that'd be the SPLC. And remember, Facebook and Twitter are using the SPLC as a guide to decide who to ban from Twitter
and
from
some
Facebook.
Federal agencies were doing that under Obama's administration.
Yeah. And so it's a good thing. They do need to be sued because they are way out of line. I mean, there are laws that apply to nonprofits, which is what they are. They are sitting, ladies and gentlemen. The SPLC is sitting on a stockpile of $356 million in offshore accounts.
Oh, well, why don't Republicans pass a bill to tax that money?
Yeah.
Instead of churches.
Yeah. So they've deliberately put that money out of reach of the tax man, but they've got it, and it's under their control. It's their money. And the IRS usually requires nonprofits to spend a certain percentage of their income, their donations, on their mission. In other words, the whole purpose of being a nonprofit is to be a nonprofit. It's not for the people that run it to stockpile $356 million in offshore accounts. That's not the reason we have nonprofit status. And so they're supposed to spend the bulk of their donations on the mission of the organization, which is fine. That's good. I've got no problem with that. Every nonprofit I've been associated with, we spent the vast majority of our donations on the mission. Relatively very little in the way of stockpiling anything. people are giving us to carry out our mission, so we carried out our mission and used the resources that they gave to us. So they definitely have broken all kinds of laws, and they do need to be prosecuted. And let's hope Jeff Sessions puts them completely out of business. They really have no reason even to be in business. If they want to run off to the Caymans and spend their $356 million in private, it's not even going to bother me, as long as they just leave everybody alone. Because the reality is they go after groups like American Family Association, which are not in the remotest hate groups. The AFA is not a hate group. We don't hate anybody. We don't even hate the guys that run the SPLC. We want them to leave us alone, but we don't hate them. We don't hate anybody. We love homosexuals enough to tell them the truth about where their lifestyle leads. So anyway, we'll keep an eye on that. Now we got a clip of Jeff Sessions talking about what Jeff just mentioned, the attack on religious liberty. Let's listen.
A dangerous movement, undetected by many, but real, is now challenging and eroding a great tradition of religious freedom. There can be no doubt. It's no little matter. It must be confronted intellectually and politically and defeated.
All right, must be confronted and it must be defeated. So he's got, it seems to me like he's got the SPLC. That's the same problem with you did. The SPLC, Southern Poverty Law Center. There's no poverty there. They're sitting on $356 million, and there's no law there. They received something like $100 and some million last year in donations. You know how much they spent on lawsuits? $3 million. Spent $3 million out of $356 million on their mission. So there's no poverty and there's no law at the Southern Poverty Law Center. Somebody needs to take them out of our misery, and that may be the job of this Religious Liberty Task Force. All right, let me run through some quick news items before we get to the break here. Rasmussen is indicating that Donald Trump, his popularity is now up to 48%. They just cannot take this guy down. They're trying to. You know, they think Donald Trump is like one of those guys that tied helium balloons to his lawn chair and just floated up into the clouds and let him down by shooting holes in the balloons and slowly drifted down into somebody's backyard. They're trying that. They can't bring the guy down. You know, that's why that guy suggested the other day that he ought to be a candidate for the Nobel Prize in physics because he has overcome the law of gravity. The more they shoot at him, the higher his ratings go. This is Rasmussen. They're the only polling company that's doing daily presidential tracking polls. He's up to 48%. And by the way, in that same poll, 41% of people believe that Hillary Clinton is more likely to be guilty of collusion with Russia than Donald Trump. Now, it's obviously true. I mean, she did collude with Russia. Remember, she paid Christopher Steele to get all kinds of dirt on Donald Trump, and the only people that Christopher Steele talked to were people in Russia. So he was colluding with people in Russia in order to get dirt on Donald Trump. So she colluded. She's getting off scot-free. 41% of the Americans, at least, now that truth is beginning to penetrate a little bit into the public consciousness. Another fight at the Trump Star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame last night, by the way. It's the second one now in 4 nights. You know, and I'm predicting that star, that place, is one day going to have iconic status. You know, because that's going to be the site where there was so much controversy. It's one place. It's a place you can find. It's not something that you can remove and hide and bury or tear down. That's the spot. Even if they take that star out and never put it back in there, that's still going to be the spot where Trump's Star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame used to be. So another fight there at the location last night. Now, this is, I take no joy in anybody being unemployed. I want to be sure I'm clear about that. But for those of us for whom the major media, the talking snake media, has been a thorn in the flesh, and I've done battle with the media all of my life, starting when I was a pastor, and then a director then the chaplain of the Idaho Senate, and head of a pro-family organization. but 23%, the employment in media has gone down 23% over the last decade. Number of people employed in media is down 23%. At newspapers, it's down 45%. 56% of the largest newspapers have laid people off since 2017. So I think the reality is people are just had it up to here. They've just had it up to here with the lies, the deceptions, the distortions they get in the mainstream media. They're taking their advertising money, their subscription money, someplace else. Be right back.
General Manager for American Family Radio, Jim Stanley.
Stacey Washington. Does that name ring a bell? You may have heard her on Fox News, CNN, or our sister network, Urban Family Talk. She's proven to be a champion for biblical values. I'm excited to announce that beginning Monday, August 6th, you can hear Stacey on American Family Radio. Listen for Stacey on the Right weekday afternoons from 2 until 3 Central, just after Focal Point.
If I had to choose one thing about Elijah that has impressed me this time more than anything else, it's the fact that he was a fiery person. He had a passion for what he believed. In our world today, we would say he had a fire in his belly.
Join Dr. David Jeremiah for his series, Someone Like You, next time on Turning Point.
5:30 a.m. and 7 p.m. Central on American Family Radio.
A Moment of Truth with Gary Bryden, Executive Director of the Association of Independent Methodists.
We mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. These words were penned by men who were not concerned about their wealth, the next election, their reputations, or their safety. With these men, there was only a desire to give birth to a nation based upon God-given rights and responsibilities and freedom. King George had branded all as traitors. These 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence knew that if they won, a great nation of freedom would be the result. If they lost, a hangman's noose would await them. They signed it anyway. Think of where we would be today as a nation if we had more leaders like these.
The Association of Independent Methodists, like-minded congregations doing together what can't be done separately. Visit aim2020.com.
American Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher.
Ladies and gentlemen, I do want to impress on you how hard we are working here.
Especially Jeffrey.
At Focal Point. You think during the breaks that we're just chit-chatting with each other and we're laughing and just enjoying it. No, we are hard at work doing research.
Yeah.
Jeff just tracked down a video
it's good.
of a dog who stole his owner's GoPro camera. And he's got it wrapped around his neck somehow. So
I think he's got part of it in his mouth, and he's carrying it.
Carrying it in his mouth.
And the camera's pointed right back at
him, so you can see his face. And the owner's back behind him, kind of running as fast as he can to track him down. So Jeff is going to try to put that up on the
I think it's going to work.
Up at the Focal Point Facebook page. I got to be able to justify our research budget here, and so I'm doing that with that. So that'll be up at the Focal Point Facebook page one of these moments.
I want that to share on my page too. Man, that's good stuff.
Cracker.
Yeah.
So, all right. Now, let me start with this Twitter story. Twitter suspended a conservative commentator over her comments about extremist Muslims and transgender troops, and they accused her of hateful conduct. That was their term, and they banned her from Twitter. Kathleen McKinley is the name of the conservative blogger to whom this happened. She's a political commentator for a Fox station in Houston, and her account has been suspended for hateful conduct based on 2 tweets. The first tweet, McKinley stated her opposition to an Obama-era rule allowing transgender troops to serve in the military. So she objected to transgender troops being able to serve in the military under Obama. This is a policy position that Donald Trump just reestablished. So they are suspending her account for hateful conduct, but this is now the official policy of the United States military. Her second tweet referred to extreme Muslim beliefs that condone honor killings. So for objecting to honor killings, this is what they do in the Muslim world, where if you bring some kind of dishonor to your family by dating an infidel, by marrying an infidel, or whatever, you can be killed. Your family, oldest living male relative, can kill you. That's an honor killing. You've damaged the honor of the family by having interactions with an infidel. You got to die. Or you marry an infidel, that's even worse. That's a death sentence. So anyway, she got suspended for those two things. So that's where Twitter is going. And to make things even worse, we're finding out now that they are hiring academics to help them police the world of Twitter. They're hiring academics from places like Oxford University to combat intolerant discourse and monitor, quote, the health of the social network. Yeah, like that is going to help. Now, there's an Albanian refugee. His name is Peter Lumaj. You know, and he made an interesting observation yesterday. You know, we've been talking about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and her lunatic approach to socialism. Wants free health care for everybody. She wants free college for everybody. She wants a job guarantee for everybody and has absolutely no idea how that's going to be paid for. We saw yesterday that doing health care for everybody sounds good in principle, but it's going to cost $32.6 trillion over 10 years. Where is that going to come from? But he said, you know, what happens with socialism, it ends with one giant prison in the end. Everything is free, but you're in jail. So you go to prison, everything is free. Showers are free, your food is free, your cot is free, the exercise yard is free, but where are you? You are in prison. So that's a good analogy. That's what happens under socialism. You know, because the only way socialism works is you have to take money from people who earn it and give it to people who don't. And now that just can't work. It can't last. You know, and if socialism was such a hot deal, you know, he asked the question, why is it that people are not fleeing from capitalist countries to sneak into socialist countries? Why aren't Americans sneaking into Venezuela? Why aren't Americans sneaking into Nicaragua? Why aren't Americans sneaking into Cuba? Why aren't capitalists trying to immigrate into socialist countries? Because it just doesn't work. The flow of people is the other way around. You know, in socialist and communist countries, they've got to build walls to keep people in, like with Berlin. We have to build walls to keep undesirables out. That's the difference between freedom and socialism, between capitalism and communism. So that is going on out there. You know, here's how bad that political correctness has got. Where was that? I had that story here just a minute ago. Oh, yeah. This is a ludicrous example of how political correctness completely run amok. You know who Gordon Ramsay is? He's a famous chef, celebrity chef. I've never seen his program or anything, never eaten his food, but I know he's a celebrity chef and he's on TV. Anyway, National Geographic is doing a special with him, taking him all over the world to sample native cuisines in other parts of the world, and then he's going to cook. He's going to have a cook-off with these native chefs, try to cook their own dishes and see if he can cook their own dishes better than they can. It'll be kind of a cook-off. And he is just being blasted for being insensitive and being racist because he has no right to cook the food of other cultures. That is culturally insensitive, Gordon Ramsay. You know, and it's just like the reaction we're having here in the studio. At some point, everybody's just going to say, forget about it. Got to duct tape my head because this is crazy. Oh, yeah. Again, the research never stops at Focal Point. Jeff Reed looked up the word mignon on the break, and it means cute. So when James Clyburn named his daughter Mignon, he's calling her a cutie.
Yeah.
So I take everything back I said. That was a nice job, Representative Clyburn. I commend you and your taste in girls' names.
Clever.
Yeah. Now here's the other example of this political correctness. I got to come up with a term for it, but this is just out of control. There's a guy, a professor at the University of Georgia, and he's a friend of Brian Kemp, who won the Republican nomination for governor in the primary just on Tuesday night, or last Tuesday. And he sent a congratulatory tweet to him. He says, look, let's just set politics aside. I just want to tell you, I've known Brian Kemp since we were kids. We played Y-ball together. And regardless of politics, I want you to know that he is a nice guy, even though he's a Republican. Well, this professor just got absolutely blasted on Twitter. And so if you can believe it, this professor apologized on Twitter for calling his friend a nice guy. I'm afraid that offended people. I'm sorry. I'll learn from my mistakes, and I will never do it again. So at some point, people are just going to look, this is nuts. This is crazy. Let's just stop this nonsense altogether. Now, Roger Pielke Jr., he's a guy that I often read on environmental issues, global warming issues. You know, one of the things we were told by the global warming crowd, the Chicken Little crowd, is that with global warming, we were going to experience more extreme weather. Extreme weather was going to be greater. It was going to be more intense. The storms were going to be stronger. The hurricanes were going to be stronger. The tornadoes were going to be more damaging and more destructive. Well, here's a report from the first 7 months of 2018. Weather disasters as a percentage of GDP are on a record low pace. This is the lowest pace of weather-induced disasters since 1990. Now, a couple of other items as we get toward the end of this segment. You know, this tension between sanctuary cities and the Trump administration and ICE, Immigrations and Customs Enforcement. You know, and in Portland, you had these Antifa protesters occupying the ICE offices in the city of Portland, so they had to move them to be able to get to work. And so they've had violent protesters coming into their offices and threatening and causing damage and so forth. And the police in Portland have said that they are going to refuse to respond to any 9/11 calls from ICE. If ICE calls, somebody's breaking into our offices, they've got baseball bats, they're attacking our employees, the police said, nah, not going to show up, not going to respond, not going to do it. So that's the latest on the immigration front. We had a Florida cop who was shot in the head by an illegal alien from Haiti. This is a guy that had been arrested numerous times for assault and other kinds of things. This guy should have been out of the country. A detainer was placed on him, but it was never honored by the Florida police. So he should have been deported, but they did not honor the detainer that ICE had placed on him, and now a Florida cop is dead, shot in the head, and died in the hospital. Here's the latest from the Religion of Peace. A Saudi Arabian couple was arrested. The guy was trying to teach his girlfriend how to drive. Remember, they just now have been able to drive. Remember, it was a highlight for Saudi Arabian women to go to bumper cars at a local, because that's the only time they could get behind the wheel. Now they're actually able to drive, so this boyfriend, taking his girl out, teaching her to drive, has got the dash cam there, so everybody can see, and he posted on video. At one point, he pulled down her hijab or pulled it up and gave her a peck on the cheek. They've both been arrested by the Saudi Arabian morality police. Saudi police on them like white on rice. Back right after the news. Stay with us. Focal Point, American Family Radio.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio.
American Family Association. We're here to inform, equip, and activate individuals to strengthen the moral foundations of American culture. Whether it's praying, signing a petition, or emailing leaders, your involvement is needed every day. Because your immediate involvement is crucial, making it fast and easy is crucial as well. Now you can subscribe to specific alerts at afa.net/connect. Register, connect, and get connected.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio, a ministry of the American Family Association.
American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh. Firefighters continue battling multiple blazes across California, resulting in thousands of acres of damages and widespread evacuations. Deputy Chief of Communications for CAL FIRE, Scott McLean, spoke on America's Newsroom today and says the firefighters and first responders have put all of their efforts into controlling the inferno.
The firefighters, the men and women, would go in, start climbing those hills, dragging hose, cutting line, making that valiant effort, and then they'd get kicked back, pushed back by the fire, by that erratic fire behavior that was so intense. They'd take another stand further down the road, go back in, trying to do the same thing over and over and over again. Aircraft are involved, dozers, all our tools are involved in these firefights. We've got 12,000 firefighters on the line. That's statewide right now, and more resources continue to come into the state from all over the nation.
The fires, fueled by dry, triple-digit temperatures, are responsible for at least 6 deaths, including 2 firefighters. Federal Immigration and Customs Enforcement accuses a mayor in Oregon of assisting anti-ICE protesters. More from Jeff Manasso.
U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement agents accuse Portland, Oregon Mayor Democrat Ted Wheeler of violating the Constitution by ordering police to stand down in his support for anti-ICE protesters and their cause.
Until he publicly renounces that, yes, they're still concerned.
Sean Waddell, lawyer for ICE employees, sending a cease and desist letter after weeks of protests in which the building that houses ICE was shut down. ICE employees say they were harassed and threatened, even denied police assistance. The mayor's office, as its legal counsel, is reviewing the cease and desist letter.
A noted Canadian educator and author says many colleges and universities have become nothing more than liberal indoctrination centers and training grounds for political activism. Clinical psychologist and University of Toronto Professor Jordan Peterson called out colleges for teaching pseudo-disciplines on Fox and Friends today and said they made a dreadful mistake by legitimizing imitation majors.
Disciplines like women's studies and these ethnic studies disciplines, which aren't disciplines, they're pseudo-disciplines at best, and they have very, very low academic standards, and they're corrupting the rest of the enterprise. You need to have standards in education, and the fact that disciplines emerged that had no real methodology and no method of proof, no philosophical background, no real history, meant that they became degree-granting enterprises, and that they emerged to produce political activists, which is exactly what they advertise on their websites. Means that you've got a fifth column of ideologues operating behind the scenes.
Christian groups hoping to see a more LGBT welcoming and affirming church met in St. Louis last week. Several evangelical voices were among those putting on the Revoice Conference.
The theme of the conference was supporting, encouraging, and empowering gay, lesbian, same-sex attracted, and other LGBT Christians so they can flourish while observing the historic Christian doctrine of marriage and sexuality. Of course, that doctrine mandates any sexual expression outside a monogamous man-woman marriage is sin. AFR's Janet Mefford says that made the conference almost nonsensical.
They talk about celibacy in the historic Christian tradition, but then you look on their website and everything was about queer culture and intersectionality and all these liberal progressive things, and it just got weirder and weirder.
One of the organizers of the conference was Nate Collins, who claims the title of gay Christian married to a woman. In his keynote address, he stressed the difficulties gay men and lesbians have in the church.
It's exhausting to live in the darkness of rejection. It's exhausting to constantly be defined by others or by a warped understanding of how and who you love.
Everything was about we're victims, we're martyrs. The church has been terrible to us. Have you never heard of the Mainline? Because the Episcopal Church, the United Church of Christ, the PCUSA would all be thrilled to have you. They would embrace your gayness, and they would be all rainbow flaggy with you.
She says with gay activists, it always seems to be about changing the conservative church because the root of the problem is that they're angry at God himself. I'm Steve Jordahl.
American Family News is online at onenewsnow.com.
You wish you could stop thinking about it, but you can't. It never quite leaves your thoughts. Even in the joyful moments, it's there. The sadness, shame, and sorrow. You know you can't go on like this, so don't. Phone the International Helpline for Abortion Recovery at 866-482-LIFE. Your call is confidential, and you'll be talking with someone who's already been where you are and found the way out. 866-482-LIFE.
Do you believe that people could take the president's vitriol as a call to arms?
I definitely think they could. I'm afraid that he could incite them to violence. A lot of them are on the edge anyway.
Are you saying that you would be willing to shut the government down?
I'll always leave room for negotiation.
People want government cut down. They don't like it to be shut down.
I would be certainly willing to consider a shutdown if we don't get proper border security.
Is the $25 billion a red line for you?
I have no red line.
For the president to trigger something like this with a month to go before the midterm election would be possibly as dumb an idea as I can imagine.
Very much, everybody. Thank you.
Mr. President, if there is no collusion with the parents if they come in illegally.
Come on, Jim. Go. We're done.
Freedom prospers when religion is vibrant and the rule of law under God is acknowledged.
An informed patriot is what we want.
Welcome to American Family Radio's Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio.
Muscular Christianity.
Where we relentlessly explore the intersection of truth and politics.
The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
Now, here's your host, Brian Fisher.
Howdy, and welcome back to Focal Point on American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name. Let's get to some sound bites as we start this second hour. You know, we're just seeing this absolutely relentless attack on Donald Trump. I don't think we'll ever see anything quite like this again, probably in our lifetimes, I'm guessing. Donald Trump is the most hated president we've ever had. I mean, people despised Richard Nixon by the end of his presidency, but they didn't really hate him. They just had contempt for him and whatever. But I mean, Trump is just an object of outright, sheer hatred. You know, one of the examples of this is that Bob Woodward, of the two, Woodward and Bernstein, that guy is just unhinged. Yeah. He's just kind of out there in his own orbit, untethered to reality. But Bob Woodward has still maintained a sense of sobriety about himself and sometimes actually makes decent observations and comments on political life. But I think this book, he's written a new book, and I believe it's just called Fear. And it's all about the Trump White House. So this is going to be a couple 100, 300-page hit piece on Donald Trump. And they're talking about this on CNN. Here's Jamie Gangle, who is CNN's special correspondent, talking about Woodward's new book.
I don't think Donald Trump is going to be happy. The first words that are used to describe this book are that it is going to reveal in unprecedented detail the harrowing life inside President Trump's White House. It has explosive discussions and debates. But here's the thing. Bob Woodward went back to his Watergate days. About 8 months ago, he went dark. He went knocking on doors of sources, and he has hundreds of hours of recordings. Everybody agreed to be recorded of firsthand White House sources and people in the room.
So this is not the Michael Wolff unnamed sources business. This is on the record.
Meticulously detailed fact-checking, and it takes you right in the room, Oval Office, Situation Room, Air Force One, White House residence, and I'm told Donald Trump is extensively quoted in it.
Extensively quoted, which is pretty, okay. So how did he get that access. Right. I mean, obviously the president didn't talk to him. So do you have any sense of where he got those quotes?
In addition to all of these interviews with firsthand sources who were in the room, he got what Bob Woodward always gets. He got documents. He has memos. He has files. He has personal diaries. He has notes. And I'm told he has notes written in Donald Trump's hand.
Ooh. So anyway, it says he's got quotes from Donald Trump, even though right there Donald Trump never talked to him. Yeah. He never talked to Donald Trump. But the book is littered with quotes from Donald Trump. So I guess if he got these papers in his handwriting, whatever they happen to be, maybe that's where they got it from. Or maybe he's quoting somebody who said it, to whom Donald Trump said it, but that's hearsay, so you never know about all that. So anyway, that is going on. So the hate march against Trump, the beating of the drums against Trump, just continues apace. Now, the media corps still out to get Donald Trump. Let's go to clip 3. Jeff included this in the tease for the program today. This is Jim Acosta. I watched a video of this, but so the news media is in the Oval Office, and Donald Trump is there. He's interviewing somebody, or he's with somebody, got a guest there in the Oval Office, and the media is just hovering over them. They got their boom mics extended out over them and all that kind of stuff. And they're leaning over the back of the couch there in the Oval Office trying to get close. And so so you'll hear how this thing ends. Donald Trump says goodbye to everybody, and then this cacophony of sounds. And finally, there's one guy that won't cooperate. Let's listen.
Very much, everybody. Thank you.
Mr. President, if there is no collusion, why does Rudy Giuliani keep saying there is no crime and collusion?
Let's go.
Mr. President, do you think other countries should not allow children to stay with their parents if they come in illegally?
Come on, Jim. Go. We're done.
We're leaving, Jim. Come on, Jim. We're going, Jim. Bye-bye, Jim. Got to go, Jim. Jim Acosta, the guy from CNN, just would not cooperate. And you heard about that dust-up over the Trump administration not letting a reporter. I don't know what they wouldn't let this reporter into, whether it was a daily briefing or whatever. But I mean, Fox was jumping in. We stand with CNN on this. Well, she created this problem because when a press event was over, she refused to leave the venue, refused to leave the room, or refused to leave the Rose Garden, whatever it was. She wouldn't leave. It wasn't she was asking the wrong question. She just wouldn't leave. Everybody else had left. She wouldn't leave. And so the White House said, well, look, you were a welcome guest up to that point. From now on, you're not going to be able to come to any of our press events until you learn how to behave yourself. And so the media obviously turned it into something that it was not. So Jim Acosta, come on, Jim. Time to go, Jim. Like a mom with a 5-year-old. Trying to get the 5-year-old in the van.
You thought she was about to offer him some chocolate milk or something to get him out of there.
So, now this is interesting because it shows, Donald Trump just getting blasted at home. But let's grab clip number 1. This is interesting to me because this is Donald Trump taking a question from an Italian reporter. So Trump's reputation, Trump's image to the media in the West is that he is a reprobate. He is a lowlife from Queens, to use, what's that guy, that George Will's language. But here's an Italian reporter asking a question of Donald Trump at a press conference. Listen to the difference.
The Italian economy underperforms regularly. Given your stellar success in the U.S. economy, what do you think would reignite the Italian economy, and what role do you think the EU should play on it? And President Conte, do you think President Trump's formula would work in Italy as well?
Well, I can answer. The biggest thing Italy needs is great leadership, and they have it right now.
What they need is leadership, and they've got it. But that's interesting to me because here's a reporter in Italy, and she is referring to what Donald Trump has done with the U.S. economy as a stellar success. You can hardly get the American press to even acknowledge that we even have an economy because it's doing so well. They don't want to talk about the numbers. They don't want to talk about the unemployment rate. They don't want to talk about it being at all-time lows, and the black community and the Hispanic community unemployment being at historic lows, jobless claims at all-time lows, confidence in the economy at all-time highs, confidence among small business at a high, manufacturing industry coming roaring back. They won't even talk about this, but here's an Italian reporter. What is your secret, President? Please tell us. Our economy here in Italy, it's in the tank, and it has been for years and years and years. Please tell us. Please tell us what your secret of success is in the United States. So just a little bit of difference in media treatment here and across the pond. We'll be right back with more. In fact, we'll be right back with a special guest to talk about the healthcare situation. Stay with us.
Are you a responsible person who finds yourself growing deeper and deeper in credit card debt and you're not sure how to fix the problem? Then get ready for a toll-free number that will put you on a path to financial recovery. Trinity Debt Management is a nonprofit organization that will consolidate your accounts into one easy-to-manage monthly payment, put a stop to late fees and over-limit charges, and reduce your interest rates by as much as 60%. You'll save thousands and become debt-free for keeps. It's not a loan. It's a smart way to relieve your stress, meet your obligations, and preserve your self-respect. If your debt has you down, we should talk. Gather up your bills and call this toll-free number for a free, no-obligation debt analysis. 1-800-788-1813. That's 1-800-788-1813. If you're in debt and you need help, call Trinity at 1-800-788-1813.
Hi, I'm Will Addison.
And I'm Miki.
From Airing the Addisons on Urban Family Talk.
We'd like to invite you to the Marriage, Family, and Life Conference coming up August 17th and 18th.
The list of speakers is amazing. We have Ryan Baumberger of the Radiance Foundation, Dr. Clarence Schuler of Building Lasting Relationships, Abraham Hamilton III, Pastor Bert Harper and his wife Jan, Stacy Washington, Lonnie Poindexter, Pastor Dexter Sanders, and we'll be there too.
There's a direct attack by the enemy on marriage and family, and babies in the womb are treated like political footballs instead of life. We want to encourage and equip the body of Christ to fight for the restoration of the family. If we can get our families on track, a lot of society's problems could be solved. The Marriage, Family, and Life Conference is from Urban Family Communications, a division of the American Family Association. You can learn more and register at urbanfamilytalk.com.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio.
Welcome back to Focal Point on American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name, congenial, convivial, and amiable as always. The program is Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio, and you're listening to the American Family Radio Network. I'm honored to welcome to our decision maker line someone who's been a frequent guest on this program, who's kind of our go-to person when we need an expert perspective on the healthcare industry and dynamics in the healthcare market. Our good friend Twila Brase. She is the head of the Citizens Council for Health Freedom. You hear her Citizens Healthcare Minute right here on this program. Got a brand new book out. We want to talk to her about that. Twila, welcome back to Focal Point with Brian Fisher.
Well, I'm glad to be here, Brian. Thanks so much.
Well, it's great to have you with us. And Twila, we talked with you frequently about, we talked about you during the development of Obamacare and all that kind of stuff. And one of the things that President Obama was doing, and I don't know if your book has anything directly to do with this, but this big push for electronic records. But you've got a brand new book out. It's called Big Brother in the Exam Room, The Dangerous Truth About Electronic Health Records. So talk to us about the content of this book and why you wrote it.
Well, the reason I wrote it is because I wanted the patients to understand what that thing is that's in the exam room and at the bedside. to let them understand that the electronic health record is not what it seems, that it was not created for patient care. It wasn't meant for patients. It wasn't meant for doctors. It doesn't follow the natural workflow of doctors and nurses to take care of a patient. And that's because it was imposed by Congress and the Obama administration for a completely different purpose. And that purpose was to track the doctors, to profile the patients, to penalize doctors, to control what they do, to put specific treatment protocols into that machine, into that computer, to make it difficult for them to actually, make decisions that are outside of what's in that computer, to penalize them if they go outside the lines, which means outside any of the treatment protocols that are in the computer. So in other words, if they use their own minds, their own critical thinking, they know that there's a different procedure that would be better for the patient, but lo and behold, it's nowhere to be found in the electronic health record, and therefore it can't be ordered, or it becomes very, very difficult for it to be ordered. So what the electronic health record is really, and a physician says this really well that I quote in the book, it is a command and control system through which all physician decisions have to be run. And that means that it's a control mechanism, it's a tracking mechanism, it's a surveillance, it's a tool of surveillance and control. And that's what people have to understand. And so I'm a nurse, I'm a registered nurse, so I know what it's like to take care of patients, and I know how standardizing treatment protocols as though every patient were the same is a really bad idea. It's also a way to ration care. It's a way to decrease costs for those who pay the bills and to decrease access to care for those who are dependent on the doctors and hospitals to provide it. So anyway, the book is in 7 different sections. I talk about the history. I quote probably 250 insiders and experts to really, I told the publisher, I said it's got to be bulletproof. I'm making a claim here because President Obama and President Obama and the Democrat-controlled Congress at the time, this mandate for electronic health records happened in a bill that was signed by President Obama just 4 weeks after his inauguration. So it was created in advance of him being, inaugurated. It was all ready to go. It was part of the Recovery Act. And essentially, what's happening here, and Hillary understood this too, because it was part of her bill that, didn't pass. But a part of her bill did become law, and that's HIPAA. And HIPAA is the foundation for controlling the entire healthcare system, for leading us to a national healthcare system, because once you have HIPAA, now your listeners might think HIPAA is the privacy rule, but it's really a disclosure rule, and I have an entire chapter on that, and part of that chapter is how patients can protect themselves from HIPAA. And so Hillary's plan was to create a national medical record system to control all of healthcare in the United States, and she got partway there when HIPAA got passed several years after she failed with her big bill, right? But then Obama put in the mandate that everyone had to have electronic health records, but not only that, they had to be used meaningfully. So it's called the meaningful use criteria, and that means it also has to be hooked up and transmitting data over the Internet. It has to be on the grid. And so this is a national medical record system for the purpose of controlling the doctors, limiting access to care, profiling patients, and developing complete dossiers, complete profiles on every American, because you'll see a quote in the book where the head of one of these electronic health record systems, who's become a billionaire as a result of what Congress did, basically says we need to know what you eat, we need to know when you sleep, we need to know everything about what's happening with you socially, because all of these things impact health. So they want to start collecting information and putting it into the electronic health record through the phone, through social media. They want you to go into the patient portal at the clinic or the hospital and start adding your own information.
Well, Twila, this is kind of mind-blowing stuff, I think, to a lot of our listeners. I'm dimly aware of some of what you're talking about here, but you know, we were sold on this electronic records, and on surface it sounds good. We want to do a better job of keeping track of your healthcare records so we can deliver to you the best healthcare we can. But what you're saying is this is really not about patients. It's not about doctors. This is really about facilitating government surveillance of patients and healthcare delivery. You know, and I went through a cancer treatment last year, Twila. I had surgery at MD Anderson in Houston. I've been to every medical clinic, I think, in the city of Tupelo and its environs. I've been to the hospital in Birmingham. And the thing that it actually kind of spooked me a little bit is every place I went, they had access to all of my medical records. They didn't have to ask me for them. I didn't have to ask my doctor in Tupelo to send my medical records to them. They were at this kind of central clearinghouse, so they could go in, punch my name in, and boom. You know, in some ways, it facilitated healthcare because they had access to everything that other medical professionals had looked at, but it was kind of spooky at the same time.
Well, they can access it because of HIPAA. But HIPAA is so much more than letting your doctor have access to your medical records for your care. There's 2.2 million entities, according to the federal government, that can have access to your medical records without your consent if those who hold them choose to provide it. And that's part of the electronic health record mandate. That's part of HIPAA. So you're right to be concerned about the fact that they have all this access, because it's not just about taking care of you for which they have access. They have access for all sorts of other things that they want to do. And so I think, you know, one of the ways to think about this is what Hillary and Obama knew, and I have some great quotes in the book that just show this. But in order to have a national health care system, you have to be able to control the doctors. So in order to have a national health care system, you have to have a national health data system. And that was foundational for both Hillary and Obama as the foundation of building a national healthcare system. And that's why the electronic health record mandate happened a year before. It happened right away after his inauguration, but it was a year before the Affordable Care Act was passed, pushing Obamacare onto all of us. I would say, and it's really important for your listeners to know this, there were doctors that had electronic health records before the mandate. And so I call the electronic health record of today the government EHR, electronic health record, EHR, right? The government EHR. It has to be certified to do what the government says it has to do. The doctors who had it before had an electronic health record that worked for them. Yeah. It was meant for taking care of patients. It worked for the doctor, worked for the patient. It was great. And it was doing what it had to do, you know, for its purpose. The purpose of healthcare is to take care of the patient, right? But the government-mandated EHR, which I call the government EHR, which is what is in almost every exam room today and every hospital room, is there to do what the government wants it to do. It's there to do what the health industry wants it to do. It's there to do what the health plans want it to do. It's there to track, profile, collect data. Do you know that your doctors consider themselves data clerks? They are spending twice as much time at the computer than they are with patients. That is a proven statistic. And 48% of physicians are considering leaving the practice of medicine or significantly reducing their patient load. 48%. That's almost half the doctors in this country. And 10,000 people are entering Medicare every day.
Twila, let me ask you one last question kind of in closing here. What are the alternatives if we want to get out of this kind of system? What are alternatives available to consumers today, and where should we go in our healthcare system?
So that is the perfect question. So let me just tell your listeners to go to bigbrotherintheexamroom.com. bigbrotherintheexamroom.com. That's a way to get, it's on Amazon, but there's a direct link from bigbrotherintheexamroom.com to the Amazon page. Okay. And in the very last section of the book, in a chapter called Steps Back to Privacy, Patient Safety, and Freedom, because patients are actually dying because of electronic health record. People don't know that, but because it's just so unsafe for patients. So there are actual steps. There's steps for Congress, steps for state legislators, steps for doctors and other practitioners, and steps for individuals, citizens, and patients. It's a whole roster of steps. Not that they have to do them one at a time. Just look through the list and pick one or two or three and move on them. States, for instance, could bring us back to privacy. States, I don't believe Congress will get rid of HIPAA, but states are allowed to pass real privacy laws mandating patient consent for everything. So they could just like put a stop to this whole surveillance and control, command and control system. And patients and individuals, I think there's probably about 40 different things I give. They're just, pick through them. Just pick through them and find one or two. Learn how the questions that you can ask your doctor to see whether they're treating you like the doctor wants to treat you or like the computer wants to treat you.
Well,
right?
Twila,
There are just things to protect yourself.
Great, thank you. I'm sorry, Twila, we are completely out of time. Got a hard break coming up. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you taking time to come on with us. Thank you for your Health Freedom Minute. We value that. We value your expertise. The book is Big Brother in the Exam Room. Go to bigbrotherintheexamroom.com. Written by our guest, Twila Brase, President, Co-founder, Citizens Council for Health Freedom. Thanks, Twila. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
People often ask me, Tim, what's your favorite part of the Holy Land Tour? I've been leading Holy Land Tours for many years now. I'm Tim Wildman, President of American Family Association and American Family Radio. I learned how to lead these Israel tours from my dad, who started doing them in the 60s. And then he taught me in the 80s and 90s. And now my wife Allison and I lead these tours annually to Israel. And we love going because we love seeing people's eyes when they see things such as the Sea of Galilee and the Jordan River and the Garden Tomb and the Wailing Wall. See all these things for the first time, and maybe the last time in many folks' lives, because this is a bucket list trip. We're going to be going in March. If you want a brochure sent to your mailbox, give us a call at 800-FAMILIES, 800-FAMILIES, option 5, and we'll send you a brochure. If you want to go to the website, everything's there, twholyland.com, twholyland.com.
Here on American Family Radio, this is David Wolin with Haven Ministries, inviting you to anchor your day in God's Word. When you think about a heritage, you think about those who came before you, right? Like your parents and grandparents. But listen to what Psalm 127 says. Children are a heritage from the Lord, offspring a reward from Him. Seems a little backwards, doesn't it? Aren't parents the ones leaving a heritage for their children? But here God says a child is His heritage to the parent. That blessing of a child is a blessing from Him. And not only that, becoming a parent gives you insight into the fatherhood of God like nothing else. No matter how old you get, if you are in Christ, you are always learning to trust God as Father, and you yourself remain His child. Get fresh insight into God's Word daily. Visit getanchor.com.
American Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. Video segments of today's program will be posted at afr.net and on the Focal Point Facebook page. You'll also find the best collection of Brian's resources on our Facebook page. If you're on Twitter, be among the very first every morning to find out what the day's show will be about. Just follow Brian at Brian J. Fisher.
Brian J. Fisher.
Howdy, welcome back to Focal Point, American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name. You are listening to Focal Point on the American Family Radio Network. Again, just a reminder, Stacy on the Right will be in this time slot starting on Monday, this coming Monday, August 6th. Stacy Washington is the host of the program at Stacy on the Right. It will be on every day from 2 to 3. You've been used to hearing Focal Point in that hour slot between 2 and 3 Central. It'll now be occupied by Stacy on the Right. You'll hear that program between 2 and 3 p.m. We'll still be on 1 to 2 Central Time, so we'll still be on, trimmed to 1 hour, but Focal Point will still be on the air. Now, there's a lot of, we've seen this violence at Trump's star, for instance. I mean, people taking a pickaxe to that thing. We've had 2 fights in the last 4 days where Trump supporters have been physically assaulted by Trump haters. So you look at the history of the violence here, the violence is coming at pro-Trump people from anti-Trump haters. It's the Trump haters that are responsible for virtually every last bit of the violence. Now, you wouldn't know this from following the mainstream media, but there have been 538 attacks, assaults on Trump supporters since President Obama was inaugurated. 538 since the election. So the real danger here, the real hazard, is coming from the people who hate Donald Trump, not from the people who support them. Now, here is Steve Cohen talking with Wolf Blitzer. And listen to this. I mean, they make Hitler analogies all the time. And here's Steve Cohen, Representative Steve Cohen, making another outrageous comparison. Let's listen, clip 2.
Let me ask you about the president's attacks on the news media here in the United States, calling the news media the enemy of the American people. As you know, the new publisher of the New York Times warned the president during a private off-the-record meeting that his attacks, the president's attacks, could actually lead to violence against members of the news media. Do you believe that people could take the president's vitriol as a call to arms?
I definitely think they could. I've seen a lot of his supporters. They listen and believe everything that they put out. It's like James Jones, and they drank the Kool-Aid, and I'm afraid that he could incite them to violence. A lot of them are on the edge anyway.
Well, that's just, 900 people died in Jonestown. 900 people died. Nobody has died at the hands of Donald Trump. Nobody's died at the hands of a Donald Trump supporter. There's been almost no violence coming from people who like and voted for and support Donald Trump. So there's vitriol out there. There's vitriol out there that is being taken by the people who hear it as a call to arms, but it's not the Donald Trump supporters. It's the people who hate Donald Trump. They're getting whipped into a froth by this kind of unhinged rhetoric that Donald Trump is Hitler, that Donald Trump is Jim Jones, that this is like Jonestown, that Trump supporters are on the verge of launching a civil war against all decent people in America, that kind of stuff. So it looks to me like if you're looking for anybody to blame for a vitriolic call to arms, that's going to have to land on the shoulders and the heads of the left. Now, let's talk about the Mueller investigation, just get updated on that. Paul Manafort started his trial today. You probably heard about that. I think they've completed jury selection, and I think maybe that trial is actually now underway. This is the first trial, by the way, that Special Counsel Robert Mueller has launched. First one. First trial that Robert Mueller. And this is not even about Trump-Russia collusion. In fact, they've specifically said that we are not going to present evidence of collusion at this trial. That's a quote from the story in Reuters. So Mueller's people are saying we will not present evidence of collusion at this trial. And remember, Mueller was tasked with investigating collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia. This campaign has nothing to do with Trump collusion, doesn't even hardly have anything to do with Russia. It has to do with the Ukraine and Paul Manafort and his business dealings with people in the Ukraine. So this is a tax and bank fraud trial, and it has to do with Paul Manafort's work for a political party in the Ukraine that happened to be a pro-Russian political party, but they were working in the Ukraine, had nothing to do with Donald Trump. And remember, Hillary Clinton admitted, it was a big splashy piece, I forget where that piece ran, on the Atlantic Monthly or one of those, where she admitted colluding with people in Ukraine to try to oppose Donald Trump. They were working actively with the Ukrainian government to try to get dirt on Trump and hold things up there. And she admitted it. I mean, you can go back and find that article right out there. I don't know how many crimes were admitted in that article. So he's being prosecuted, 18 criminal counts, none of which has to do with the campaign. I think all of the offenses with which he's being charged happened before 2016. before there was even a campaign. So Manafort's not even in trouble for what he did during the campaign. He's facing the possibility of spending the rest of his life in prison for stuff that had absolutely nothing to do with the presidential campaign. I mean, that's an indication, again, with just how thin the case against Trump is and the Trump campaign is on this. He's going to have to face a second trial in September. That one's a money laundering trial. Failing to register as a foreign agent of Ukraine. So again, I mean, it's just, this is supposed to be a Russia probe. You know, and you got to ask yourself the questions, like here's the summary from Reuters. Manafort faces 18 criminal counts, which center on allegations that he hid much of the $60 million he earned in Ukraine. And you got to ask yourself the question, what in the world does any of this have to do with the 2016 campaign or Trump-Russia collusion? And the answer is nada, zip, zilch, nothing. Okay, well, let's play clip number 4. This is CNN's legal analyst. His name is Renato Marriott, and he is talking here about how nervous President Trump ought to be. Let's listen.
I would be extremely concerned if I was the president. I think at this point, I would be very surprised if Robert Mueller didn't conclude that the president obstructed justice. There's a lot of evidence out there, and tweets are just one form of communication. I agree with you on this point. Tweets are one form of communication. There's a lot of evidence that the president had an intent to obstruct or impede the special counsel's investigation, and he took more concrete actions than just tweeting. He fired James Comey. He tried to pressure the attorney general to unrecuse himself. I mean, now he wasn't concerned about conflicts of interest in that circumstance. I think those are very concerning, and Mueller should be using all of the president's thoughts and words and actions when evaluating his intent.
And again, let's remember that Alan Dershowitz said a president cannot be impeached, cannot obstruct justice if he's simply exercising constitutional authority, if he's simply exercising authority that has been vested in him by the Constitution. And remember, all executive power in the Constitution is focused on the president. He is the sole source or implementer of executive power. Now, he can delegate it to people under his authority, tell them what to do, but he is the sole repository of executive power. All executive power, according to the Constitution, resides in the presidency, just like all legislative power rests in the hands of the legislature, and all judicial power rests in the hands of the court system. So all executive power is deposited in the president. So he has the authority to hire Mueller. He has the authority to fire him. Jeff Sessions works for him. He has the authority to certainly request that Jeff Sessions, his employee, recuse himself or unrecuse himself. So none of this would represent obstruction of justice. And I'm playing this soundbite in part because I want to point out to you, want to alert you to this. You remember when the election first happened, I told you right after the election, what we're going to hear from now on out till the end of time is Russia, Russia, Russia. It's going to be Russia, Russia, Russia. Well, they tried that. It played out. They had nothing on Russia. So then it was collusion, collusion, collusion. Collusion, collusion, collusion. And they couldn't find anything on collusion. So that started to fade. Now it's going to be obstruction, obstruction of justice. They keep retreating, trying to find something, some hook they can hang Trump on, and they just have not been able to find it. But obstruction of justice is now the latest favorite stalking horse they've got out there. Now let's talk about immigration here for a second. Got a couple of sound bites on that topic. Let's grab clip number 6. Donald Trump talking about a possible shutdown. Remember, he said, I could be willing to shut down government if I don't get funding for the wall. So he gets pressed a little bit on that, and let's listen to what he has to say.
Are you saying that you would be willing to shut the government down in September if it does not fully fund $25 billion worth of your border wall and also deliver all of the immigration priorities that you listed in your tweet? Or are you leaving some room for negotiation there?
I'll always leave room for negotiation. We need border security. Border security includes the wall, but it includes many other things. I would certainly be willing to close it down, to get it done. As you know, we are already approving things in various bills, including we're going to be taking care of the military. We always put the military and law enforcement very high. But I would be certainly willing to consider a shutdown if we don't get proper border security. Thank you. Please.
Sir, just to follow up on that quickly, is the $25 billion a red line for you?
I have no red line, unlike President Obama. I just want great border security.
Well, what that sounds to me like, President Trump is not going to take a risk of shutting the government down. That's the way you interpret that. He's quoted. You said, if they don't fully fund the wall, I'm going to shut down the government. He says, are you going to do that, or are you going to leave some room for negotiation? Trump says, I always leave room for negotiation. Is this a red line for you? And says, no, I don't have a red line. So Donald Trump basically saying, look, I said I was going to shut down the government. I ain't going to do it. Not going to happen. Focal Point American Family Radio. We'll be back with your phone calls. Number to call is 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840.
This week, Alistair Begg concludes our series titled Firm Foundation by providing guidance in the basics of the Christian life. Whether you've followed Jesus for years or you're just starting out, you won't want to miss a message. Listen this week to Truth for Life with Alistair Begg.
Truth for Life, weekday mornings at 11:30 Central on AFR and online at afr.net.
Culture is a product of us being placed in a particular location, and it is God's desire that his light bearers would culture or cultivate a particular area.
Join Abraham Hamilton III as he presents the biblical case for cultural engagement. It's a powerful video resource from the American Family Association's Cultural Institute series.
You and I create the culture of our country.
Visit afastore.net.
Len Ingram of Redeem Clean felt God call him to support the American Family Association.
I'm a laundryman. I'm the son of a laundryman too. I love clean clothes. I love the business. I love everything about it. This project was built exclusively to support AFA and AFR. There's no strings attached. Another thing that I would like to see come out of this is that I would like to see other business people feel a calling to support ministries wherever and whatever they do to share the gospel of Jesus Christ.
In addition to your regular AFA giving, Redeem Clean Laundry Detergent allows you to increase your support of AFA just by continuing to wash your family's clothes. For clean laundry and support of a cleaner society, it's Redeem Clean. Learn more, find options, and get Redeem Clean products at afastore.net. That's afastore.net.
American Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. Focal Point, Brian Fisher.
Howdy, and welcome back to Focal Point on American Family Radio. Last segment of today's program. If you want to give us a call, 888-589-8840 is the number, 888-589-8840. Just two more sound bites on the immigration and the wall shutdown idea. You know, I'm just expressing my personal desire. I wish Donald Trump would do it. It's time to play put up or shut up with these guys. It's time to draw a red line. I would be happy for Donald Trump to make this a red line. You fund the wall or I'm shutting this puppy down. We're through playing games here. I need $25 billion. We can get the Mexicans to pay for it through taxing remittances. Let's get her done. And I'm going to veto any spending bill you have that doesn't include it if you don't do it. But apparently Donald Trump, parsing what he's saying here, he is not. He's not going to go into a showdown here with Mitch McConnell and Congress. And Mitch McConnell is certainly has no interest in doing the thing that takes spine and courage here either. Clip number 7.
Is the funding of the border wall going to wait until after the midterm elections?
Probably, and that's something we do have a disagreement on. And
so Homeland Security won't get funded before the midterms?
Probably not, but most of the government will be covered. And then at the end of the year, if we can't reach an agreement on that, we'll do what's called a continuing resolution for that little portion of the government spending that's left unpassed in individual bills.
So you're not worried about a government shutdown before
No,
the midterms?
that's not going to happen.
That's not going to happen. That's Mitch McConnell. We're going to do what we've always done. We're going to cram everything into one big, giant, humongous omnibus bill. We're going to wait to the last minute so Congress has to do it if they want to go home and campaign for their reelection chances. So they're going to pass it. We'll bloat it up. It'll be filled with all kinds of candy and sugar pops for this group and that this group and that group, and then we're going to get out of town and go try to get reelected on the grounds that we're the party of fiscal responsibility. You want to get the budget in line, you elect us. You send us Republicans back there, and we'll get it done. So Mitch McConnell has no taste for a fight on the budget. Now here is Brett Hume. He's weighing in on this idea of a shutdown over the wall. He doesn't think much of it.
I think it's a terrible idea for the reasons mentioned by John Roberts. Whichever party is deemed responsible for or most enthusiastic about a government shutdown gets the blame. The people want government cut down. They don't like it to be shut down, and this has been proven time and time again. The last time the Republicans were seen as responsible for a shutdown, this was back during the previous administration. It was a shutdown over, I can't remember now what. Oh, yes, it was over Obamacare. It was a disaster. The Republican Party's standing with the voters plunged to the lowest level in the history of the Gallup poll. Then a year or so ago, when the Democrats were seen responsible for what was called a Schumer shutdown, it lasted about 2 days, and the Democrats completely capitulated because they saw the handwriting on the wall. It works badly for those deemed responsible. So for the president to trigger something like this with a month to go before the midterm election would be possibly as dumb an idea as I can imagine.
So indications are, ladies and gentlemen, as much as we'd hope for a shutdown over the wall, it ain't going to happen. 888-589-8840. Let's begin with James in Missouri. Again, that number is 888-589-8840. James, what's on your mind? Talk to me.
Well, the president is the commander-in-chief of the military, and he's not getting his wall to protect our borders, so why doesn't he use the military to protect our borders?
Well, I got the same question you do. This is like an invasion. He uses the term invasion. This isn't immigration. This is an invasion from people who do not have our best interests at heart. There's no reason why, in my view, he could not use the military. You can't use the military for police purposes. That's the posse comitatus idea. We have a sharp delineation between military and police. Police are responsible to enforce the law. Military responsible to protect our national security. Fine. Send the military down there to defend our national security and control the border. You know, it's interesting, James. We're doing that in Korea right now. We've got 30,000 troops on the border between South and North Korea. And that border is locked up tight. You know, when somebody makes a run across that border, it becomes international news because it never happens. So there's no reason not to use the border. You know, we could even use the military to build the wall. I mean, there's a whole division of the military that's a construction division. They build bridges, they build walls, they build dams, they build structures. The CBs are called for short. That's part of the military. Let's just go ahead, use the military budget, and get them working on throwing up this wall. Great suggestion, James. I am totally with you on that. Let's go to Mary in Kansas. Mary, welcome. What's on your mind?
Yes, you said in Oregon that the mayor told the police to step down and not assist the ICE if they were attacked. ICE is a federal group, correct? Police force, basically. Can't President Trump say, okay, if you're going to refuse help to them, then I can call in the National Guard, the military, to protect my people? It seemed like something like that could be done. And also, I'd like to thank the firefighters and all the people that are going to California to help them, and they're not sitting back saying, well, I'm Republican or I'm a Christian, I can't help them. So I'm thankful for all the thousands of people that have gone to California to help them and everything. So thank you.
Okay, and amen to that. And those fires are just, they're really dangerous, out of control. The one in Northern California is the 9th most destructive fire in the history of the state. You've got 17 fires burning across the state of California. You got fires barreling towards small lake towns in Northern California. As we speak, 2 firefighters, 4 civilians, including 2 children, have been killed in the fire. 1,818 homes have been destroyed. 311 outbuildings. 165 homes have been damaged. 27,000 people right now have been evacuated from their homes. And this is a fire that was ignited, the one that's threatening the city of Reading. I played in softball tournaments in Reading. The fire that's threatening that town was started by a vehicle problem about 10 miles out of town. So it wasn't arson. And I'm willing to bet, I told you this the other day, but once we get to the bottom of why these fires are so out of control, you're going to find lack of forest management. If you log in these forests, you thin out the fuel load. If you have logging in there, you don't have the buildup of fuel load on the floor. You don't have these tall, spindly trees because they can't grow big and thick when they're crowded by other trees. You don't have these crowns where the fire can leap from one crown to the next. A lot of reasons why logging is good for forest health, and it's good for preservation of human life. You know, and they don't allow them to build fire breaks. Here's a story here about firefighters setting blazes at the bottom of some hills in order to burn up the tinder dry brush before flames crest the ridge, feed on it, and go downhill. Well, you could do that when you don't have a forest fire to fight. You can build that kind of a fire break to protect homes. You don't have to wait till the fires come. And then when the fires come, then they do what they should have been doing all the way along. But Mary's exactly right. A lot of them, I mean, 2 of them have died already. They are risking their lives in order to protect lives and property, and we do commend them for that. And yeah, Mary, to your question about National Guard in Portland, he certainly could. I mean, he could nationalize, militarize the National Guard and send them there to patrol the streets and protect the ICE offices there in Portland. Let's go to Robert in Rogers, Arkansas. Robert, welcome. What's on your mind? Talk to me.
Yes, sir. I like this red line comment. I figure, it's my yard. You figure out when you step in it. And there's a Brett Hume comment. Their polls and everything they come out with, they're always wrong. So I can't hardly take anything they say about shutting down the government.
Yeah, well, I think you're right about that. And I think it's something, I mean, it sounds like you're supportive of a shutdown, Robert. And I think most of Trump's base is. I'd be virtually willing to bet if you just took a poll, Trump's rating right now in the Republican Party is like at 88 or 90%. The Republican Party is with him on this. His base is with him. They want a government shutdown if the Democrats and Mitch McConnell and Paul Ryan won't cough up the money for the wall. They know that this unrestricted illegal immigration is bad for America. It's bad for our security. It's bad for our communities. More violence, more drugs, more gangland killings. It's just not good for anybody. They want something done about it, and they're ready for President Trump to shut down the government in order to move things forward. All right, Robert, appreciate the call. Let's go to Junior in Westland, Texas. Junior, welcome. What's on your mind? Talk to me.
Yeah, well, thank you for taking my call there. Listen, about this wall, I've been hearing all this rhetoric all this time. It seems to me if you're at you want to build a wall, you're at your right to do so. But if you want to take somebody else's money to do it for you, it's theft. And you like to go by the Bible a whole lot. And so hence the hypocritical thinking that comes out of you that I'm hearing. And I wanted to get a little more insight on you based on the good word. Why do you want to steal money from other people to fit your needs?
So are you saying, Junior, that it would be inappropriate to tax the American people to provide for our national security? Because
we're already getting taxed.
What's that?
We have a Border Patrol force clear across the border that's doing a great job. Great job. I got family members in the Border Patrol.
Yeah.
But I do not agree this rhetoric about you guys always talking about taxing the Mexicans. People can do with their money what they please.
Well, yeah, but I mean, we're paying for the Border Patrol with taxpayer dollars. Why wouldn't we pay for a wall with taxpayer dollars to keep bad people out of our country? I don't get the.
I agree with that. I agree with that.
Okay, well, then we're on the same page.
Border wall all you want. just stop with this rhetoric that you're going to tax the Mexican people.
No. What we'd be doing, Junior, is taxing Mexicans who are in America, benefiting from the American economy, and sending the money out of our country. Tax them 4% just on those remittances. They don't want to get taxed. They don't have to send the money back home to Mexico. Well, that's it for today. Bow low before God. Stand tall before man. Stand in the gap where God has placed you. And never forget, we are fighting a winnable war. See you tomorrow.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast may not necessarily reflect those of the American Family Association or American Family Radio.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio. You can be among the first to receive